one of the biggest roles as a coach is to be able to see that vision for them and that future for them and that awesome self that they are going to become, like, more clear than they can.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is Dr. Hailey Steinhauser. She's a chiropractor and a wellness coach. She helps people get their health back on track using mind-body techniques, specifically powering up the nervous system, breaking old patterns that keep us in survival mode, and focusing on living in the present, which is an amazing, powerful tool in and of itself. So, Dr. Hailey, thank you so much for being on Self Talk.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, good. So let's jump in. So chiropractic and wellness coaching, how did you get into either or both of these fields, and did one come before the other?
Yeah, so chiropractic came first, and that's where it kind of all started. I've always been a chiropractic patient, and once I decided when I was a teenager that I wanted to be one, I never changed my path. That was just the way it was going to be. So, and then through my schooling with chiropractic is when I learned more about how impactful even just the mind and your thoughts and stress responses and all of those things actually impact your physical health. And so that's where that door kind of started opening. And then I learned some techniques and different ways to help patients with that. And then the more I got into actually working with patients, I realized like how great of a need a lot of people had for really diving into the coaching part of it. So more than just small sorts of tidbits of information or tips and things like that. Like those are always helpful. And I think a lot of people find great use in that, just like the one-off, like, oh, just start implementing this into your daily life, or, you know, we need to kind of dig into this a little bit deeper and process this, and that's going to make a huge difference for you. But a lot of people just needed more help. So that's why I got into the coaching as well. So there could be more of a deep dive and really that one-on-one support into how can we impact your mind-body connection to make greater changes, not only in your health and how you're feeling, but also your whole life, kind of, because that is everything is so far reaching. It impacts everything. So yeah, so that's where that came from.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Even in my work as a psychotherapist, I shifted from just working with the mind to the mind, body, spirit, because it's so important to have that holistic support system. And one of the things I talk about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is I speak with my patients a lot about using the body as an ally in our wellness. Sometimes when we get sick, we think our body has done something to us, or you know, you're in chiropractic, and I love chiropractic. I've seen a chiropractor since I was 27. I swear by it. It's a beautiful practice. And it's helped me immensely too. But when, you know, when our back hurts, when our, you know, when we're sick with it feels like our body has turned against us.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we feel like, well, I just have to sort out what's wrong with my body and then everything will be okay. Like it's separate in some way. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. Do you find that in your practice?
Yeah, I find that that's a very common thing to start believing. Like as a person, you know, like, oh my God, my body is turned against me. Or like women with their periods, like someone who has like really bad menstrual cycles, like they're like, oh, my body is attacking me. That's against me.
Yeah.
But rather kind of working through things and shifting that dynamic and shifting that thought process, because it's trying to work with you. It's screaming at you that something is going on. And like symptoms are an indicator that, okay, something's going on behind the scenes. What is it? And what can we do to try and make some changes there? So I like you saying that just made me think of one particular client who had that realization, because she was like, we did some mind body work and she was realizing, oh, I kind of always like think negatively about my body and my cycle and or like even with migraines or these other symptoms that happen, like it's my, like feeling like there's that duality, like there's an attack rather than oh, maybe this is just something that's helping me take that next step and realize, like, have these realizations, and like, I need to go back and process something from 20 years ago. And that's what my body
Right,
has been telling me. So
right,
I think that it's really huge to work through and have that dynamic shift of, oh, we're working together, even though sometimes things aren't nice. Sometimes things like
right.
feel really horrible, but we're
Mhm.
working together and there's a purpose for all of these things. So yeah,
Right,
I love
right.
that.
Yeah. And do you find that in terms of, I mean, because I work a lot with trauma, trauma lives in the body and can
Yeah.
manifest itself, quite honestly, a lot in the spine. And
Yes.
yeah, so what do you encounter with patients? I mean, I know that you probably have a lot of people who come to you for various ailments, but what could you speak to that a little bit about trauma and the body?
Yeah, 100%. So, with chiropractic, we always talk about like there's three causes of subluxation. Subluxation being like the big fancy word for like where you need to get adjusted, like where
Hmm.
there is interference in your nervous system that you need to kind of get powered up to make it so your brain and your body can communicate better. And I think the most easy to understand one is just like physical trauma. So if you have poor posture, or if you were in a car accident, or if, just one of those things where it makes sense, like sports accident, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But it's not always that. And usually, even if it is that, there's another component as well, which is going to be thoughts. So that's your stress, that's your trauma. So, like emotional trauma that has happened in the past. And then also toxins. So that's going to be just like if you're eating food that's not good for you, if you're breathing air that's polluted, if like you're putting things on your skin that aren't good for you,
Hmm.
and some of these things you can control, some of them you can't, but it's really important to see like it isn't just one thing, it's everything. And so if you're seeing something going on in the spine, for me and my chiropractic patients, like if somebody comes in and they have a problem, let's say it was one of those things where like, oh yeah, I got injured in sport or had an accident or something like that. So yes, we'll start with that physical component. But if you're not progressing like I think you should, or if this is one of those things that kind of keeps cycling in, that's really
Mm,
common, right? So someone
right,
has their low back pain and they come in and they get it care of, but then it comes back 3 months later. It's like, why is this happening? It's
right.
something else. There's some sort of trauma being stored in that body. And it could actually be directly related to whatever sporting accident or car accident or whatever happened, right? Because there can be that emotional trauma from
Absolutely.
that specific thing, but it might even be emotional trauma or stress from something that is seemingly unrelated, right?
Mm,
So, like, if you had a tough childhood, or if you were bullied, or if you have a stressful job, or if you're having relationship struggles, like all of those things, when you're not able to fully process it in the moment. And honestly, that's a very difficult thing to do because a lot of people don't have those tools quite yet.
right.
That's going to get stored somewhere. And it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, if it's this type of trauma, it's going to get stored in this specific place, but it can vary person to person. But that is a thing that I see with my chiropractic patients. And again, that's one of the things that kind of shifted me into coaching as well, because I think that having the tools to work on both is really important. But
Mm,
even with chiropractic, like that's also a huge conversation to have with the patient too, is being like, okay, well, so I'm seeing this responding. And for me, what I'm saying is like, this is stress related too. So opening that door to see if that patient is ready to dive into healing from another angle as well.
yeah, and that's a big one is to even recognize that, oh, this could be something else than just the physical trauma, right? And
Yeah.
you made a really important point, which is yes, you might have physical trauma, but there is almost always emotional trauma attached to that physical trauma.
Yep.
If you're in a car accident, that's scary.
Right.
Speaking from a shamanic perspective, part of your soul can leave your body, for a while
Yeah.
until you're better and it can come back
Right.
safely. So right. So I love that you combine the chiropractic, the technical work with the wellness. And I wonder if you could talk about what that looks like in your practice. So do people normally come to you for chiropractic work and then the wellness is sort of worked in, or do they come in specifically for wellness, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah. So, especially in the online world, people are coming to me specifically for the wellness coaching. So they
Okay.
see like, okay, I have anxiety or I have a lot going on in my life and I feel like I'm spinning my wheels and I'm just stuck. So they're coming to me specifically for that because that's all virtual. So that's, I mean, I get contacted from people for that.
Mm-hmm.
But with chiropractic, it's a little bit of everything. So I think in general, people go see a chiropractor because of a specific thing or because they've been introduced to chiropractic and they've been going all their life and they're maybe they moved and they're just like looking for another chiropractor to have that wellness
Sure.
care. And then but then the door opens, right? So I always talk holistically with my patients and try and it has to be like those doors have to open in time with each patient. It's not going to be the same for everybody. Like some people are not aware of how the mind affects the body. So then it's starting with those
Mm-hmm.
conversations of like the intro, right? So
Right.
the little baby steps. And then some
Yeah.
people are like, oh, my neck is out because I'm having a really, really hard time at work. So like I know exactly what it is. And it's stress specifically that's causing what I'm feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a whole range of people for that. And then with the chiropractic work, I do specific, like there's a technique called neuro-emotional technique that I absolutely love for targeting that stress component of what's going on in the spine and what's going on in
Mm-hmm.
your physical body that is more related to the emotional body.
Yeah. So can you describe that? What's neuro-emotional technique? Roughly, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically it's saying, okay, first we'll do some muscle tests and see, yes, where we're starting does
Okay.
have to do with stress. It does have to do with an emotion that needs to be processed. And then there's a series of steps that it takes you through to see, okay, well, why? What emotions are involved?
Okay.
What is this taking us back to that didn't get processed at some point? Because when something happens, like I'm sure you know in the work that you do, if something happens and it doesn't get processed, the body remembers. And that's not
Correct.
even
Yeah.
just saying it in a energetic perspective. Like it literally remembers in your nervous system. It
Yes.
stores that in an area of your brain called your limbic brain. And then we can go back to that part of your brain for patterns because the brain
Mm-hmm.
likes to be efficient. And so if something happens and you survived, then it is like, okay, well, that's good that we survived. So we'll do it again and it'll be great and it'll be fine and we'll keep surviving. So
Mm-hmm.
then you can get into these cycles where you are surviving, but things are not thriving. And it's probably starting to spiral down and get more and more uncomfortable in some way or another. So that is what we see showing up in the body. And that's what we get taken back to with this neuroemotional technique. It takes you to a space in that limbic part of your brain where you can actually process it. So even if it happened years ago, now we can actually like breathe through, have certain connections in different like meridian systems, and
Okay.
then actually process what's going on.
Beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love how that they do work together. That's a great technique. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I know a little bit about muscle testing, and that's also a really wonderful way to communicate with the body, uh,
Yeah.
to listen to it. It's almost like, a translator, of
Yeah.
what your body is going through to test and find out, it's usually yes or no, right? It's usually a yes or no kind of response with the body.
I think of it more of as like if your body's congruent with it or not.
Okay.
Because it's not necessarily something you can like use as is this true or is this false? Like, it's not
Mhm.
like a polygraph or anything like that. But
Right.
it's seeing like, okay, with whatever we're testing, does that make sense to the body? Or is it
Mhm.
getting distracted? Or is it
Yes.
not making
Mhm.
sense or something like that? And then that's where you can really use it to guide you along like certain techniques like that one that I was talking about, or even like, okay, where are these issues in your body coming from? Is there something going on in your digestive system? Is there something going on in your spine, or
Yeah.
something along those lines? So it's really, I love being able to muscle test. It's an awesome technique to use.
Yeah, it is amazing. So tell us a little bit. On your website, you have something called the Healthy Habit Studio, and can you tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that's where my coaching, my wellness coaching kind of was born. So,
Mhm.
and I think that it's a really cool place because then I also have an online community in association with it, because the mind body work I think is directly related to habits as well, because I think that helps there be that multiple components of breaking old responses and creating new ones. Because in the mind body work, you mentioned it at the beginning, like I really like working with breaking old patterns, like that even cuts into the neuro-emotional technique. You're breaking old patterns that used to have a charge, used to have a purpose, but they're not serving you anymore. So we want to break those patterns that don't have a good thriving purpose anymore. And then beyond that, we want to create new patterns. We want to create new healthy habits that are going to help put you in a position where, like, not only are you feeling better in your physical body, but also feeling more connected with your true self, feeling more energetic, feeling more confident. Like, it's a little different for everyone because we're all starting from a different place.
Right.
But that's the Healthy Habit Studio.
Yeah. And breaking patterns is such an important part of shifting what isn't working for us, as you mentioned, to what is. And I do similar work in psychotherapy, but it's interesting because one of the biggest obstacles to that is that sometimes a client or a patient isn't able to see that future self that they want to be. And and it's difficult sometimes to break patterns. We talk about neuroplasticity, that it is possible for us to change the neural pathways in our brain from something that's not working to something that is. How would you coach around that, where someone is thinking to themselves, logically I know that this isn't a great pattern for me, but I'm not sure how to shift what I need to do.
Well, as I'm sure like one of the biggest roles as a coach is to be able to see that vision for them and that future for them and that awesome self that they are going to become, like, more clear than they can. Because maybe they can't on a certain day, or even in general, they're not quite there yet. They don't see that other self. But through the work that you do, like, you can see it for them and you can help them see the bigger picture just in that communication with them in your sessions. But then also, I think in terms of like getting a client to that first step, which is logically being able to see, okay, this isn't where I want to be, is to actually start looking at their identity, right? So whether or not they're dealing with something physical, like maybe they have a sickness, or maybe they've been in pain for a really long time. So it's that chronic pain that they're dealing with, or they've had really low self-confidence for a really long time. It can be kind of any component of their life. If it's been there for a while, subconsciously you identify with it. So you might even, like, in your logic brain, identify with it too, if you're really kind of not in a great place. Or you might even be a little bit further along and see that logically it doesn't make sense. Logically, you don't want to be sick anymore. Logically, you don't want to be in pain anymore. Logically, you want to have that self-confidence. So you might be at that step, but a part of you still identifies with that negative part, right? So then doing work to see how to kind of let go of that old identity, because that's a pattern too. Because the reason you identify with that is because it helps you survive. It helps put you in a place where it makes sense, where your body can now respond appropriately. And even though things aren't great in this or this area, you're still okay. Right. So then that's your body trying to get some level of homeostasis and ability to, like, do what it needs to do. But now you're like, okay, I'd like to go to the next step though. So you have to switch that. And that's doing the mind body work. And that's, there's so many different things you can do with meditation and affirmations and the stress reduction techniques. And, like, even just things like, I'm okay with being healthy. I'm okay with being confident, and then doing the work to make that statement actually true.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point too, is at some point, I always say, you're going to follow the same dysfunctional pattern because it has something to teach you. And when you're done with that lesson, you'll be ready to move on to the next level. So, and I appreciate what you said, is I'm okay with, like, those kinds of reminders. I'm okay. I hesitate to use affirmation, but those reminders that I am okay with being healthy. I'm okay with changing this identity that I've had for so long, where I'm sick, or I'm in pain, or I'm not or I have no self-confidence or whatever. At a certain point, you say, no, like, that's not how I want to live anymore. I'm done with this. I've learned that lesson. And I see that it's just a dead end every time. Right. So, and it's really like the hero's journey of being able to say, okay, I've got my backpack of tools and I'm heading out into the wilderness and I have no idea where I'm going to go, except I know that this isn't where I want to be. Right. Yeah. And it can be very frightening.
Yeah. And being able to step into that fearful zone in a positive way. Because people often talk about like, oh, fear-based decision, but there's that fear that maybe isn't a good driver for your life. But then there's also fear that sometimes it's important to step into. Yes. And also I love what you're saying about like the lessons and everything. Like you're like in one area of your life, you're going to be stuck there until you learn whatever lesson it's trying to teach, because that's so true. Like every emotion, whether it's the positive ones or the negative ones, like they all have a purpose, right? Yes. So, and I think that also ties into how sometimes people can start thinking that their body's against them or their mind's against them, because they keep seeing like, why do I feel this way? Well, there is a reason, and it's actually some things in there, and maybe you need some help, or maybe there's just like a different kind of scope you can look through, a lens that you can look through. But like that's there for a reason, even if it's going to kind of, the next step might be really uncomfortable. And the next step might be breaking down some barriers that you'd rather not dive into in your logic brain. But if you can do it, it's going to just make everything so much easier.
Right. And that's part of it too, is that commitment to say, well, and that's why you do what you do too. You're the support system that says, if you fall, I'll catch you. Right, it's okay. So don't be afraid. Just take a step, and I'm right behind you. I've got it. Exactly. I've got your back. I've got your back, literally.
Yeah, love it.
Oh my God, is that your tagline now? I've got your t-shirts. Back. Oh, gee, I'm sure that's not the first time that joke's been made. But that's wonderful. I love what you're saying, and the idea of having the courage to move forward. Even that is changing your neural pathway.
Yeah.
When you take every little baby step, you said baby steps earlier, so true. When you take every little baby step, you're retraining your brain to know you can do this. You can do it. Yep. I say, forget about the person in the future that you want to be, because you're already that person. It's just that person is kind of buried under a bunch of muck. And so we need to kind of clear that out and let you see who you already really are. So it's a really beautiful practice. Yeah, beautiful. Mm-hmm. So how can people reach you, Dr. Hailey?
Well, they can reach me. I'll send you links, because they can reach me on Facebook. I'm pretty active on there, and that's where my Healthy Habits group is. If you want to be a part of that, I send a lot of information through there for folks. And you can also reach me through my website, so healthyhabitstudio.com. Mm-hmm. And I'll even send you my email address, because I think that whatever way makes the most sense. I'm mostly electronic, so rather than the phone, because that gets crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
But yeah, and then for all of you listening out there, I offer a free call. So I want to, like, if someone's out there listening and thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm ready to unwrap some of these layers, or at least see where I'm at, see what might be best for me on my path. I'd love to chat with you and see what's going on, where you want to be, and if it makes sense to work together. So I'd love to offer you guys a free call for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. So I will make sure that your links are in the show notes so people can contact you. Dr. Hailey Steinhauser, thank you so much for being on Self Talk today.
Thank you so much for having me.